want to talk about Brexit now. God help me. Those iron balls. Fine. Let's talk about Brexit. So why people actually solicited talk about Brexit was because Johnson, in his infinite dickishness, has decided to prorogue Parliament. Now, this doesn't happen as rarely as some people seem to think it does, but it is fairly rare, and it's a kind of ballsy dick move. The kind of thing that we can expect from Johnson, I think. And a lot of people are weirdly cheering it on, and a lot of these are the same people who supposedly are all for democracy, and yet they're fine with our directly elected parliament, which is supposed to be sovereign, being dissolved so Johnson can bypass resistance to at least a no-deal Brexit, if not a Brexit at all. Hypocrites. Wankers. So there was a proroguing of Parliament in 1997. Right. What was that about? That was about the Cash for Questions scandal, which the older amongst you may remember, 1997. Just before Blair swept to power, and in no small part contributed to Labour's swoop to power, because the Tories were seen as rightly, absolutely frigging corrupt. And John Major, who was in government at the time, is being made out to be a hypocrite because he was willing to prorogue Parliament then, but is against it now. Well, the difference being that back in 1997, it was being done to spare the blushes of some Conservative MPs and to delay the presentation of a report on the Cash for Questions scandal. So petty, yes. Proroguing Parliament should clearly be something that's only really used in drastic conditions, but even so, right, that was not remotely as serious an issue as we face now, and nor was it really a perversion of democracy per se, unlike now. See, that was done for petty reasons to protect Tory MPs from scandal. Not just Tories, to be fair. This is being done to completely bypass the democratic structure of the United Kingdom government and to force through a no-deal Brexit against the explicit wishes of Parliament and, to an increasing extent, the people, because it's something like 2/3 to a third against a no-deal Brexit. And no, it was never on the ballot. It was never presented as a viable solution. It was only ever presented as a bargaining position, really. Nobody voted for a no-deal Brexit, right? Simple fact of the matter. However much you've revised history in your little brains, it's not the case. So where do we now stand? So, we have an ill-advised referendum that was held because of divisions in the Tory party, not because of any reasons for the government, that went the wrong way because of decades of propaganda by the Murdoch press and egregious lying and illegality on the part of the Leave campaign, and even then was only narrowly won. It was advisory. If it hadn't been advisory, it would have been overturned due to the illegality and so on, and yet we're treating it as though it's absolutely binding. Public opinion is turned against it, particularly in the case of a no-deal Brexit, but nobody seems willing to test that either with a general election, bad idea in my opinion, or with a second referendum, which I see as being the only way out of this, with a clear choice between leave with no deal or remain on the ballot, because that's where we're at now. And the government that negotiated all that is out and has been replaced without any sort of general election, without any sort of legitimacy, by Boris Johnson and the hard-right Brexiteers. Nobody voted for that government, and there's a lot of hypocrisy going around, because when Brown took over from Blair, you should have heard the screaming that there should have been a general election then. But Brexit has taught us, if nothing else, that people are a bunch of hypocritical wankers. So there's that. And now this unelected, untested, democratically, hard-right Tory government, hell-bent on forcing through the worst version of a Brexit that was only ever approved by corruption, by completely bypassing Parliament. And yes, we had a civil war about this before, about whether Parliament was in charge or not. Democracy relies on certain things. It's a consensual hallucination of consent, really, which can only be manufactured by responsibility and expertise and democratic legitimacy. We have none of those things in the current state of affairs. People are misinformed, disinformed. People have deluded themselves as to what they voted for and what people said, and it doesn't seem to matter, right, if you directly quote people's words back to them or the politicians' words back to them. Yeah, post-truth. We live in a postmodern political system. But whether leave or remain, it's obvious at this point that our democracy is broken and needs some root and branch reform. But the politicians who are in power, apart from a few of the minor parties, aren't ones who will make that change, because the status quo suits them. Swings and roundabouts, blue or red. What's likely to happen next? Could be a general election. Johnson will take us to the brink, no doubt, and then maybe spring a general election after he's bribed the electorate with this emergency, not really a budget, governor honest thing that's coming up. End austerity, which is, a good thing, it's welcome, it will help, but they're doing it for the most cynical reasons since Thatcher launched her defence of the Falklands. Vote grabbers. And it's likely to result in another hung parliament. And it's likely to be two coalitions against each other, really, which is more like European democracy, ironically. The Conservatives and the Brexit Party, probably, versus everyone else except Labour, who could ruin the whole thing by still thinking that they can win all by themselves. But we shall see, I'm sure. I don't think a general election's going to sort it, because our electoral system is fucked as well. Great. So, the one thing that Johnson has done by doing this is that he has reduced the amount of time that is available for Parliament to introduce legislation to stop him dissolving Parliament and forcing through a no deal. But Burko said he's going to try and make time for it. So we'll see. It's a lot of challenges stacked up. But don't you dare come to me talking about democracy when you're willing to suspend Parliament to force through an illegal vote on something that is going to gratuitously harm this country and damage its democracy. The EU is more democratically accountable than the UK is. If we lived in another country, I don't know, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, France, somewhere like that, and you were complaining that the EU was undemocratic, you might have at least part of a leg to stand on. Maybe a foot, maybe as far as the ankle or the shin, perhaps. But from the UK, a constitutional monarchy, no, the EU is much more democratic and accountable and protects our freedoms and so on a lot better than our own government does. And once we Brexit, if we Brexit, the big plan is to basically sell off all the family silver and turn us into a pound shop Singapore. Speaking of the fucking Queen, while we're here, a lot of people are saying, oh, Her Maj could have stopped this, why did she agree? No. Right, the monarchy really is only a symbolic position, right? Parliament, government, the executive, the Prime Minister acts with the authority of the Queen. The Queen has absolutely nothing to do with it. in the vast majority of situations, and she is forced to act on the advice of her Prime Minister. Right? It's tradition, it's convention, it's misleading language. But if you haven't studied UK politics, particularly, you might not necessarily know that. So, upbraiding the Queen for going along with Johnson is just ill-informed, right? While I am a small R Republican and would like to get shot of the royal family, you can't really blame them for this. You can't blame Her Madge for this. There's nothing she could do. I mean, I guess technically she could refuse, but she has no actual power to do so. There's a few things where royalty could flex its muscles. This isn't one of them. And if they did, it would be a very, very brief constitutional crisis until the monarch's powers were even more curtailed. Not that she really has any anyway. So yeah, there we go. In summary, an illegal referendum, narrowly won, off the backs of decades of disinformation and propaganda, is about to be, well, attempted to be forced through by a government that hasn't faced the ballot box, by avoiding Parliament. And you want to say that's protecting democracy? Okay. Okay. The worst part of all this is that I see people cheering this on, and specifically saying, Johnson's protecting democracy. 17.4 million votes. Bullshit, hogwash, balderdash, piffle, nonsense. Absolute fucking nonsense. Right? Take a moment, look at yourselves, think about what you're saying. How is avoiding democracy protecting democracy? Fuck's sake. You are the reason that I drink. Oh, God fucking damn it. Wankers.